Content warning. Please be advised this book contains descriptions of domestic abuse. I will be talking briefly about these book sections in this video, so please beware. Why did it take so long for me to read this book? Hey guys, welcome back. So it was time. I've finally read It Ends With Us after putting this off for so long. We're finally here. Not gonna lie, I'm being driven mainly by It Starts With Us, which is set to release in October of 2022. I love reading new releases, so to read that one first, I had to read this one first. So hi, here we are. This is going to be a spoiler talk, so if you have somehow managed to avoid reading this book that was published back in 2016 and you don't want anything ruined, well, this is your warning. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more book videos. So this book is from the point of view of our main character, Lily Blossom Bloom, lover of flowers and gardening. Yes, her name very much coincides with that. She is 23 and she's living in Boston at the time of the story. In this story, we get to see her navigate working through the trauma of her childhood. She grew up with an abusive father. He has since passed away. She has no remorse over his death because he was really shitty throughout her childhood. She's also navigating being a new business owner. She's just opened up a flower shop. She has also been developing a relationship with Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon. So she's a pretty busy girl. So this story is told from first-person point of view from Lily. We also get to read journal entries to read from her childhood, mainly around the time when she was like 15. And this is how we learn about the majority of her bad childhood and her interactions with another character, Atlas. He was a homeless teen that was living in an abandoned house that was the house backed up to her backyard. He was her first love. So these journal entries are written in the form of letters addressed to Ellen DeGeneres because Lily loved watching the Ellen show every day. I think it's always awkward when something like pop culture is referenced so frequently in a book. I would much rather that it wasn't. I think that it can really age a book, and I think that's really obvious here. Like the whole Ellen thing didn't age well, in my opinion. The pop culture references like just don't make your book timeless. And I do think that's a bummer, especially for a book like this that's still so popular all of these years later. But that might just be a personal preference. Maybe I'm a bit salty with this specific pop culture reference because Ellen really doesn't seem like a nice person, and that bothers me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Drew Gooden has a really good video covering this, so you can check that out if you want. But for me, I was just kind of like, man, we're going to reference her throughout this entire book. Okay, so beyond that, let's get into the love story aspect. So we have Ryle. He is training to be a neurosurgeon. He is an almost 30-year-old fuckboy. And he truly is a fuckboy, and he is proud of this. He tells her this almost immediately when they first meet. They first meet on the rooftop of his building, and he literally says, "When I have time, there are girls who satisfy those needs. I don't lack for anything in that department, if that's what you're asking. But love has never appealed to me. It's always been more of a burden than anything." So right off the bat, he makes his intentions very clear. Like I said, they first meet on the rooftop of his building. He lives on the top floor of this high-rise apartment building with his sister and her husband. They are super rich. Lily doesn't live in this building. She just went up there to get some air and to think after her dad's funeral. So they spend some time talking, and he literally tells her that he wants to fuck her. And she's like, "I'm not into one-night stands." And he's like, That's a shame. So after this, they go their separate ways. And in the story, we just move forward 6 months. So in this time, Lily has purchased a store from her inheritance from her father. It's going to be a flower shop. So on the first day she has the store, she's, before she's even done anything to it, this woman comes in, and her name is Alyssa. She's bored and she's looking for something to do. So Lily ends up hiring her. So throughout the day, they're spending some time like working on the shop, and then Lily falls and sprains her ankle, and Alyssa calls her husband and her brother to help. And of course, the husband is Ryle. Just kidding. Ryle is actually the brother. So Alyssa and Ryle are brothers, and brother and sister. So now, since Alyssa is working for Lily, Ryle is going to sort of be in the picture now and just going to be like hanging around all the time. So now let's transition to today's edition of That's a Red Flag, Babe, Ryle edition. So let's circle back. The first time meeting you, he tells you he wants to fuck you because he's a fuckboy. Red flag. The second time he sees you, when he's tending to your twisted ankle, he tells you again that he wants to fuck you. Red flag. When you turn him down again, he refuses to be a decent human and help you home with your twisted ankle. Red flag. I have to read this section. Alyssa leans over and says, Ryle, maybe you should drive her home and take a cab back to the apartment, just to be safe. Ryle looks down at me and then shakes his head. I don't think that's a good idea. She'll be fine. I had a few beers, probably shouldn't be driving. You could at least help her home, Alyssa suggests. Ryle shakes his head and then pats the roof of the car as he turns and walks away. I'm still watching him when Alyssa hands me back my phone and says, seriously, I'm really sorry about him. First he hits on you and then he's a selfish asshole. The 2 times I spent with Ryle were on days I'd probably rather forget. My father's funeral and spraining my ankle. But somehow him being present made them feel like less of disasters than they were. I hate that he's Alyssa's brother. I have a feeling this isn't going to be the last time I'm seeing him. Yeah. Then a week later, he shows up to your apartment and literally begs on his hands and knees for you to sleep with him. Red flag. There's a really big naked truth coming, okay, he says. Brace yourself. I fold my arms over my chest and watch as he inhales a breath, preparing to speak. These next couple of months are the most important months of my entire career. I have to be focused. I'm on the end of my residency, and then I'll have to sit for my exams. He's pacing my living room, talking frantically with his hands. But for the past week, I haven't been able to get you out of my head. I don't know why. At work, at home, all I can think about is how crazy it feels when I'm near you. And I need you to make it stop, Lily. He stops pacing and faces me. Please make it stop, just once. That's all it'll take, I swear. His head drops between his shoulders and he shakes it back and forth. He pushes off the door and stands up straight. He half turns, heading for the hallway, but then suddenly drops to his knees in front of me. He wraps his arm around my waist. Please, Lily, he says through self-depreciating laughter. Please have sex with me. He's looking up at me with puppy dog eyes and pathetic, hopeful grin. I want you so, so bad, and I swear once you have sex with me, you'll never hear from me again, I promise. When you don't sleep with him after said begging, even though for some stupid reason you were still going to give in and give him what he wanted. Why would you do that? But by the time you got out of the shower and back into the bedroom, he was already asleep. Good, he doesn't deserve you. Anyway, you don't hear from him again for another few months. He comes to your store's grand opening, he buys you flowers, and in the card he writes, please make it stop. Still begging for sex, Ryle? That's such a red flag. It's gross. Stop. Then, when you go to Alyssa's birthday party with your gay guy friend as your date, Ryle sees this and gets jealous and smashes a wine glass. Again, a red flag. You brought a date? I was just trying to make things easier on you. You know, trying to make it stop. He smirks and then downs the rest of his wine. How thoughtful of you, Lily. He tosses his empty wine glass toward the trash can in the corner of the room. He makes a shot, but the glass shatters when it hits the bottom of the empty container. I glance around me, but nobody saw what just happened. When I look back at Ryle, he's halfway down the hallway. He disappears into his room. I stand here looking at the picture again. Oh yes, the picture. When you were at the party in his apartment and you see a picture that he took of you from the first night of meeting him almost a year ago, blown up and framed on his wall, that's creepy and a red flag. Okay, so that concludes today's edition of That's a Red Flag, Babe. Those are just the red flags from about 25% into this book, and it was a lot. So we're at Alyssa's birthday party, and like I said, Ryle got jealous, smashed a wine glass, and then he comes back and takes her into his bedroom. They share a passionate kiss, and then he decides that he wants to just try dating her. So she tells him, we're gonna do that, like, we're not having sex. So they just decide to do a trial run of the whole dating thing. And it's hard to say if he frames it as a trial run because he's such a fuckboy and he's not used to relationships, or because he knows that he is going to be a very shitty boyfriend, and that's why he's always stayed away from relationships. Hard to say. So I have to say it was a little hard reading this book because while I didn't know much about the actual story of the book, and I did know that everybody loves the Atlas character, and in the end, him and Lily end up together. So knowing that Ryle isn't the guy made it much easier to see his like barrage of red flags in the beginning and to hate on him for this and like everything he did in the book. And the whole time I'm reading about like their developing relationship, I was just waiting for Atlas to resurface. So now Atlas's tale is a sad one. He was 18 when he met Lily, and once he turned 18, his abusive stepfather kicked him out of the house. So there was an abandoned house behind Lily's, and that's where he lived. So during that short time that they knew each other, Lily helped him out by bringing him food and clothing and spending time with him. She would sneak him into her room on like cold winter nights so that he would have somewhere warm to stay. And we knew that once he graduated in 6 months, he was planning on going into the Marines. And then during this time, he also discovered that Lily and her mother also suffered abuse at the hands of Lily's father. So they were really able to lean on each other, and they just got each other. And again, we're learning of their past together by Lily reading through her old journals. So we got small tidbits of their time throughout the book of what she had going on in the present. So it was kind of like mixed in. So we're back to the present. Lily and Ryle are about a week into their trial run relationship. They go to dinner with Lily's mother. They go to this new restaurant that's just opened. And at this restaurant is where Atlas resurfaces. He's working there, and during this time, he and Lily have two very brief conversations alone. The first one is in the bathrooms, and the other is at her car. We learn that he has been seeing someone for almost a year. Lily feels like after seeing him, she may now have some closure that she needed to move on. So from the journals, we had learned that Atlas left where they lived. I think they lived in Maine, but he left there to go to Boston to live with his uncle. So that's where their relationship sort of ended. But he always said that like he would find her again because she said that she would go to Boston. But more on that later. So moving forward, Lily and Ryle officially start dating. And at this point in the book, they've been together for 3 months, and things seem to be going really well for them. Surprisingly, I actually started liking Ryle a little bit and was like, oh, okay, like he seems okay. Maybe I was too hard on him in the beginning with the whole like red flag thing. Now that they're in a relationship, he's being good and they seem really happy. But that didn't last long. So then fucking one night he comes over for dinner to her place. They're drinking, and he burns his hand by taking a dish out of the oven. And in a simple reaction, Lily starts laughing because, you know, they're like a little tipsy, and that's a very normal reaction to have when a dumbass tries to take something out of the oven without hot pads. She's like giggling about it, being like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And she goes to like look at his hand, and he like hits her, like backhands her, and like she falls. And I was reading it and I literally was just like out loud, I was like, no. Like I had this feeling that this may be coming up in the book, but I was honestly hoping that it wasn't going to go that way because he had been being so nice in their relationship. I was really hoping that like he would just end up being a nice guy. But in the story, like, you know, with Atlas resurfacing, they spend time together. And in the end of the book, like there would, or like during the book, there would be like a love triangle between the three. But then she just ends up, you know, liking Atlas better. But it didn't seem so. And I was so bummed when this is the turn that the book took. Even though like looking back, the turn is pretty obvious. I was just very much hoping that that's not the way the book was going to be going. So immediately after that happens, Ryle is profusely apologizing and saying like it was an accident. And it's like, no, like that shit doesn't just happen. But he reassures her and promises her that like over and over again that he's not her dad and it won't ever happen again. And she tells him that if it ever does happen again, that she will leave him. So the next night, Ryle, Lily, Ryle's sister, Melissa, and her husband, Marshall, they all go out to dinner together. And when Lily had fallen the previous night from his hit, she got a cut on her head. And Ryle tells Alyssa at dinner that she had slipped on olive oil and fell. Liar! Back to the red flags. So anyway, the four of them are at dinner at the restaurant where Lily had saw Atlas working. And he comes over to bring them their desserts. And she learns that he owns the restaurant. It's his restaurant. While at the table, Atlas also sees that Lily has a cut on her head and Ryle's hand is bandaged up. And he immediately puts it together. And Lily goes to the restroom to like get some air and calm down from after learning that he owns this restaurant. And Atlas comes into the bathroom and he confronts her about it. And, you know, props to Atlas for noticing and for caring so much. He tries to tell Lily that she should leave him. What happened? He asks. I shake my head. Nothing. His eyes are narrow, still ice blue, but somehow burning with fire. You're lying, Lily. I muster enough of a smile to get me by. It was an accident. Atlas laughs, but then his face falls flat. Leave him. Leave him? Jesus, he thinks it's something else entirely. I take a step forward and shake my head. He's not like that, Atlas. It wasn't like that. Ryle's a good person. He tilts his head and leans forward a bit. Funny, you sound just like your mother. His words sting. I immediately try to reach around him for the door, but he grabs my wrist. Leave him, Lily. So she leaves the bathroom. Ryle comes looking for her and Lily, and he sees them leaving the bathroom together, and he freaks the fuck out. And then Atlas and Ryle have this brawl over Lily in the hallway. And then Ryle tells Atlas that he is just the homeless kid that Lily pity fucked. Burn. So red flags everywhere. Ryle's mad as hell. Lily and him leave, and then they talk it out. And Lily tells him that she originally didn't want to go back to that new restaurant because when she had seen Atlas there previously, and she didn't want to see him. This makes Ryle happy, and he says how much it hurt for him to see them together. They profess their love again, and they make up, and they decide to put it behind them and move on with their lives. So the next day, Atlas comes and sees Lily at the floral shop, and he comes to specifically apologize for what he had said to her about her being just like her mom, and he gives her his number on a sticky note. He puts this in between like her phone and the phone case, and he says, just in case she ever needs it. And oof, I was like, that feels like this whole ominous thing. Ryle is definitely going to find that phone number and freak out. And then I have a feeling that Lily is going to need Atlas's number. I just know that at that point, I knew that was going to be coming up. So basically it's implied that like, they're just not ever really going to see each other again. But if she has an emergency ever, that he wants her to let him know and it'll help her. And I love this part when he's like leaving. Atlas, wait, what Ryle said to you the other night? I bring a nervous hand up to my neck. I can feel my heart beating in my throat. I never said that to him. He was hurt and upset, and he misconstrued my words from a long time ago. The corner of Atlas's mouth twitched, and I'm not sure if he's trying to smile or trying not to frown. He faces me straight on. Believe me, Lily, I know I wasn't a pity fuck. I was there. Ha, what a smooth motherfucker. I do really like him, like the more I'm like around him. But he's not even in the book enough. He needed to be in it more. So I was sad. Like, so basically they just like leave it on that. And I'm sad because it's like just knowing that like he's probably not going to be in more of the book, except for maybe when bad things happen, which they do. So after that encounter, we know that like, you know, they were each other's first. So finally we get the last journal entry of Lily's teenagehood. And we get what I've been waiting for, like being able to like know exactly what had happened, like at the end of Atlas and Lily's like relationship. Atlas has been gone for a few months per the journal entry, and he comes back one night and surprises Lily at her window on her 16th birthday. So this is the night when they have sex for the first time, but Lily had forgotten to lock her bedroom door. So then Lily's dad comes in and he beats the ever-loving piss out of Atlas. He puts him in the hospital, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm really unsatisfied that they had fallen out of touch after what had happened. Like Lily even says that she wasn't even sure if he was okay after that. And then like some time later, she had like kept tabs on him over the years, and like she saw that he was in the military, and then they just never talked again. And I'm like, I don't know. I was unsatisfied. I'm like, did you guys not have like Facebook or like cell phones? Like, I don't know. I had a cell phone at like 12, and like I understand not Atlas not having one, but like Lily, I don't know. Like I just feel like she should have, or I would have even settled for like landlines. Like you can secretly talk to each other like late at night on the phone. Like I'm sure Atlas's uncle had a phone. Like I don't know, or like if you had Facebook accounts, you could have messaged like. But then the story obviously wouldn't have unfolded the way that it did. Like. Fine. I just kept thinking to myself, like, I don't know, like, you know, like we have technology. Like you guys could have found each other again. You guys could have talked all these years later. Like you could have found each other before just running into each other randomly in Boston. I was just like, then none of this would have happened. Then Lily wouldn't have to go through any of the shit that we're going to have to go through in part 2. So now we're transitioning into part 2. And I was immensely disappointed the book didn't turn into a love triangle. But here we are. I kept wanting her and Atlas to be together and to have him resurface and to have them like start talking and dating again, but we don't always get what we want. So then I also thought that part 1 was more interesting than part 2. I liked like the setup for the book, and I liked learning about all of the characters and learning about Lily's past. But with part 2, we're just kind of moving right along with Lily and Ryle's relationship, and part 2 opens with a fucking engagement and a marriage between them. I did not see that happening. I was so disappointed. I got this horrible feeling in my gut when they went to Vegas and got married. I'm just like, don't marry him. This isn't going to be good. Like, I cannot tell you how much I just wanted the second half of the book to be her and Atlas rekindling and just like Ryle not being a part of it. I'm just like, don't marry him. Don't marry him. He has so many red flags. Don't marry him. But then after the wedding, their lives just kind of kept puttering along. I don't know. I didn't like part 2 of the book, like I've mentioned, probably because of all of the domestic violence. We keep going on this like roller coaster of life, of like life's good, it's good things are happening, all these great things are happening, and then like bad thing, of course. Like, so they get in a fight, Ryle and Lily, because Ryle had dropped her phone and the case fell off, and guess what he found? Atlas's number. And so he calls it, and then he realizes it was Atlas's number, and he freaks the fuck out. And then Ryle ends up pushing Lily down the stairs, I just knew that that sticky note was going to come back up. And I was just so pissed off. Like, he literally is just like, Lily, he whispers, you fell down the stairs. And it's like, fucking pushed her. So to Lily's credit, so this is the second occurrence. To Lily's credit, she does tell him, get out of my apartment. You're hurt, Lily. I'm not leaving you alone. Get out, I yell. He catches the pillow. I grab another one and stand up on the pillow, start swinging at him as I scream, get out, get out, get out. So to her credit, she does kick him out, just like she originally said she was going to after the first occurrence. But then the next day, she walks into the flower shop and Ryle and Alyssa are there. And Alyssa's like, Ryle, you need to like talk to her and tell her. And so basically we get this whole story from him about why he is the way he is. So we learned that when he was 6, he was playing with a gun that he thought was fake, and then he accidentally killed his brother. So obviously he's, fucked up from that occurrence. And he says that's why he can't control his anger issues, which, yeah, that's incredibly traumatic for him to go through as a child, but still. So they talk about working through his anger together, and they come to the agreement that whenever they have like a fight, they just need to like walk away from each other and like calm down and then come back together once he's calm and, talk about this. So after they talk about that and they decide to just move forward in life with this new strategy. So they move into an apartment in the same building as Alyssa. And then suddenly, of course, everything just seems so like sickeningly perfect. So definitely waiting for like the next shoe to drop on this one. And oh buddy, did it drop. So like I said, everything's just so perfect in their lives. Lily wins like this newspaper award for best new business. They're all happy. And Alyssa, who is pregnant, she goes into labor on this same day. So Lily is at the hospital with her after the birth. Ryle goes home from the hospital. And when Lily goes home that night, Ryle is in a mood. We learn that he has found and read her diaries in a total invasion of privacy, and then discovered this magnet that she keeps on the fridge. And he learns from the journals that it was a magnet that Atlas had given her when they were 16. And then he also learns that the little tattoo that she has of the open heart on her collarbone is a dedication to Atlas. And so learning all of this sent him into a boiling rage. He forces her to read the newspaper article about like the new places in Boston that she was featured in. And Atlas was also featured in this. And he says that in his section, he says that his restaurant is named Bibs, and it's short for Better in Boston. And this was inspired by a woman that he used to know. And the magnet says Better in Boston. And this is what sparked the rage in Ryle, as he realized that, the magnet was from Atlas, plus the journal entries confirming this. So he's just fucking livid. Now, obviously, a normal, rational person would be like, I would prefer if you didn't have your ex-boyfriend's magnets on our fridge. And then she would be like, oh, okay, sounds good. I'll put it away. But he didn't, because he's a fucking psycho. So violence ensues. I'm not going to describe it. But once it's over, Ryle's asleep. And this is when we learned that Lily had memorized Atlas's phone number after he gave it to her. Because deep down inside, she had a feeling that she would need it someday, which is heartbreaking. So she calls him, and he gets to have his hero moment, and he comes and he collects her and he takes her to the hospital. So at the hospital, things get worse. She learns that she's pregnant. So now she has a forever link to Ryle, and that's a bummer. So after that, she stays with Atlas, and they kind of fall into a pattern of sorts of living together for a couple of days. Lily is obviously very gutted about her life right now, and she needs to figure out what the fuck she's going to do. So she's been completely ignoring Ryle during this time. And then a few days later, he comes into her work and he gives her his apartment keys because he's leaving for England. He's doing some sort of neurosurgeon training or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Who cares? And he'll be back in 3 months. So he tells her to go back to the apartment because he won't be there. Go back home, Lily. I won't be there. I promise. He turns and begins walking towards the door. It occurs to me that he didn't even try to apologize. I'm not angry about it. I understand. He knows that an apology will never take back what he did. He knows that the best thing for us right now is separation. He knows what a huge mistake he made, yet I feel the need to dig that knife in a little deeper. Ryle, you know the worst part about this whole thing is? He doesn't say anything. He just stares at me waiting for an answer. All you had to do when you found my journal was ask me for a naked truth. I would have been honest with you, but you didn't. You chose not to ask for my help, and now we'll both have to suffer the consequences of your actions for the rest of our lives. Ooh, I thought that was so good. I was like, twist that knife in there. Like, got you, Ryle, you bitch. So Ryle's leaving for 3 months. Good. After he says he's leaving, I was thinking like, oh, good. Ryle's leaving for a long time. And he doesn't know about the baby. So he's leaving. And I'm like, oh, this is a perfect time for you to pack up your shit and get out of that apartment. Send him, the divorce papers and, let's start up this thing with Atlas. But no. So after Ryle says he's leaving, Lily, she finds out that Atlas is single. All the more reason to get your divorce going and start dating him. But he tells her that when they first saw each other, he had lied and said that he was in a relationship because he saw her and fucking Ryle together. And so like he thought like, oh, she's really happy. So he lied. And I was so gutted because in her inner dialogue, she's like, why would he lie to me? Ryle and I weren't even an official couple yet when I ran into Atlas at the restaurant that first time. Hell, if Atlas had given me any reason to believe there was a chance between us that night, I know without a doubt that I would have chosen him over Ryle. I barely even knew Ryle at that point. I was like, damn it. I was so bummed because I was like, they could have been together like I wanted. And then she also, back I said that he said that if she went to Boston, that he would like find her and they could like resume the relationship or whatever. And so she's like, why didn't you ever come back for me? And then he says that he did, that he found her on campus, back in the home state. But he saw her with like a group of friends and like with her boyfriend at the time and saw that she was happy. So he just didn't go up to her and just kind of like let it go. So then she says, like, in reference to like why he lied about having a girlfriend, I want to ask him why he did it, why he didn't fight for me, but I don't have to ask him because I already know the answer. He thought he was giving me what I wanted because all he's ever wanted for me was happiness. And for some stupid reason, he's never felt I could get that with him. Consider it Atlas. So she decides it's too confusing to be around him with her feelings. So she decides to go back to the apartment and to move home. And Atlas says to her, if you ever need me, I want you to call me, but only if it's an emergency. I'm not capable of being casual with you, Lily. And then he says, Lily, he whispers, still holding me tightly. I know this is the last thing you need to hear right now, but I have to say it because I've walked away from you too many times without saying what I really need to say. If in the future, if by some miracle you find yourself in the position to fall in love again, fall in love with me. So I'm just like, okay, so he's out of the story again. And I was so irritated, but it makes sense. Like the big reason why they kind of cut contact when he first moved away, when they were teenagers, like him saying like he's not capable of like just being like friends with her basically. So I guess that's why they didn't talk over the landlines like I bitched about earlier. But yeah, so disappointing that this is like basically the last time that we see Atlas for the main story. We see him again eventually, but we're not there yet. So blah, 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 time passes. Lily's pregnant. And actually I was very happy for Lily. She had such a strong support system to get through all of this. There are two separate moments when Alyssa and then her mother are told everything about what's been happening. And these conversations and sections I thought were done really well. I was worried to know how everything would go between Alyssa and Lily, since Ryle is Alyssa's brother. So she says, "My brother loves you, Lily. He loves you so much. You have changed his entire life and have made him someone I never thought he could be. As his sister, I wish more than anything that you could find a way to forgive him. But as your best friend, I have to tell you that if you take him back, I will never speak to you again." So really happy that they're going to be able to like continue their friendship because it's a really great friendship for them. And then Lily tells her mom, okay, my version of this book sucks. The pages keep falling out. Like the binding is not good. Anyway, so when she goes to tell her mother, like they talk about her mother's past abuse. And I actually thought it was really interesting to hear her side of things. So she says that we all have a limit, what we're willing to put up with before we break. When I married your father, I knew exactly what my limit was, but slowly, with every incident, my limit was pushed a little more and a little more. I lasted 5 years now. What's 5 more? Don't be like me, Lily. I know that you believe he loves you, and I'm sure he does, but he's not loving you the right way. He doesn't love you the way you deserve to be loved. If Ryle truly loves you, he wouldn't allow you to take him back. He would make the decision to leave you himself so that he knows for a fact that he can never hurt you again. That's the kind of love a woman deserves, Lily. So I thought that conversation between her and her mother was really good. I thought that what she said was super impactful about, you know, if he truly loved you, he wouldn't allow you to be with him, basically. I did think that this book did a really good job of being very candid about these types of situations and being able to see what the victims of like this violence, like their thought processes and, you know, like what's going on in their heads during these times. I do think that the book did a fantastic job covering that. So time has passed. Ryle comes home and he kind of like surprises her and he sees that she's pregnant, which is a big ol' surprise. And he really wants to work things out because of course he does. Lily says no at first, but then like slowly they start spending more time together, but they are living separately during this time. Their separation was very surprisingly like amicable. And Lily talks about thinking like not being sure whether or not she wants to like work on the marriage or if she wants to divorce. And so she decides to make a decision after the baby is born because she wants to just focus on the baby at this point. And the baby is what changes everything for her. We get to the part where she finally gives birth. And as soon as she sees her daughter, she knows what she needs to do. Literally immediately after giving birth, she tells Ryle that she wants a divorce. And then he pushes back on this decision to her. And she gives him like multiple scenarios of like, what would you tell your daughter if she came to you and said like this or that? And like, it was crazy to read. Like she says different scenarios of like, what would you do if one of these days this little girl looked up at you and she said, "Daddy, my boyfriend hit me." What would you say to her, Ryle? "Stop, Lily," he begs. "Daddy, my husband pushed me down the stairs. He says it was an accident. What would you do?" And then she just keeps going on. And then he's like, "What would you say to her, Ryle? Tell me. I need to know what you would say to our daughter if the man she loves with all of her heart ever hurts her." "I would tell her that she is worth so much more, and I would beg her not to go back. No matter how much he loves her, she's worth so much more." So Lily describes how like she knows that he will be a great father because of all of these qualities that he has, but there's no way that she wants her daughter to grow up in the situation that she grew up in. And she knows that like he can't be a great father in a scenario where they're married. So in that moment, she decides for her daughter, it ends with us. And I thought her tying the title of the book into that moment was just like very perfect. So she says, "Cycles exist because they are excruciating to break. It takes an astronomical amount of pain and courage to disrupt a familiar pattern. Sometimes it seems easier to just keep running in the same familiar circles rather than facing the fear of jumping and possibly not landing on your feet. My mother went through it. I went through it. I'll be damned if I allow my daughter to go through it. I kiss her on the forehead and make her a promise. It stops here with me and you. It ends with us." And so that's the end. And then we get into the epilogue. I was so happy. I was so happy that she decided to leave him. Like, I knew that was going to happen. Like, I was like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure that's how it's going to end. But I was just so happy, like, when she finally made that decision. The whole time during her pregnancy and the whole time they were together and just all that time, I was just like, leave. Like, I was just, it's like one of those things where it's like you can like breathe again, where it's like so happy that she decided like no more. Now let's talk about Atlas. Like, why was he not in more of this book? So for me, the pregnancy in this book was a huge shock. So by her saying, like, by the title, I thought it meant like it ends with us, as in like Lily and Atlas getting together during the story, and the abuse ends with them being together and like being good to one another. Like, I thought in part 2, when they got married, I never thought there was gonna be a baby involved. When they got married, I thought part 2, like, it was gonna transition to the cycle ending with, you know, their relationship. And I never thought about it being about like the cycle ending with her not raising her daughter in that environment. So it was different than I was expecting and like thought it was going to be, but it was so good. Way more impactful to have her be like, the cycle ends with this, like with her daughter, versus like the cycle ends with her just like ending up with Atlas. It was so good. In the epilogue, finally, Lily and Atlas get their moments. So it's 11 months later after Lily gives birth, and she runs into Atlas on the street. She's about to drop the baby off with Ryle. She makes it clear to Atlas that her and Ryle are no longer together. They chat for a little bit and then they go their separate ways. But then like 2 seconds later, after she drops the baby off with Ryle, she's like, the fuck am I doing? And so I loved this scene, and I thought it was like the perfect way to end the book. She's like sprinting through like the crowd of like the sidewalk. Atlas, I yell, he's running in the other direction, so I keep pushing through the crowd. Atlas, he doesn't stop walking, but he stops walking, but he doesn't turn around. He cocks his head like he doesn't want to fully trust his ears. Atlas, I yell again. This time he turns with purpose. His eyes meet mine, and there's a 3-second pause where we both stare at each other, but then we start walking toward each other, determination in every step. 20 steps separate us. 10, 5, 1. Neither of us take that final step. Lily, he says quietly, I feel like my life is good enough for you now, so whenever you're ready. I smile up at him. Okay, I'm ready. He brings his mouth to my ear in a whisper. He says, you can stop swimming, Lily. We finally reached the shore. So they're finally going to be together and they get their happy ending. So guys, if you read this book years ago, I cannot imagine having to live with that just being the end to the story for years. For me, knowing that the new book that's coming out, It Begins With Us, is going to be like, you know, Atlas's point of view and then like what comes after. I am just so happy. I need more Atlas, and I need a book for like just them, and I need to know how the new book is, and I'm dying for it to be here so I can read it. I want a book that's just centered on him, and I want him to be throughout the whole book because I felt like this book needed more of him, and I expected there to be more of him, but there wasn't. So I'm just so excited for the new book to come out. I do have to say though, like overall with this one, I thought it was a great read. Like, you know, obviously everyone praises it, and I am glad that I finally read it. Surprisingly, it didn't make me cry like I was expecting it to. Everyone says it's very like emotional, which it is very emotional. But I think that's just because for me, I've read a good handful of books that cover domestic violence. So I wasn't as shocked with reading those scenes. But in regards to that subject, I do think that Colleen Hoover did a really good job covering it well, and covering it very sensitively, and gave us the insight to somebody who is in the cycle and how this comes to be. Throughout the whole book, she did a really good job of like drawing you back in time and time again and being like, it's okay. Like, look, he's playing nice. And then all of a sudden being like no, like just having it just be like this shock where it's, it's like what she's going through, but you're also going through it as the reader. But it was also very apparent to the reader, like it wasn't going to be working out for them. And then I think I liked the book even more when, after reading the author's note, we learned that she was drawing from her mother's own personal experiences throughout the book. And I just feel like that made it like even more heartbreaking. So that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I know this one was probably a long one. Thanks for spending your time with me. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and let me know which Colleen Hoover book I should read next in the comments. And we'll see you next time. Bye.